I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.
Hello, welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another episode of Known Quantities. I'm your host, Daniel Miller, your go-to for cutting edge of science, technology, and UAP, leading with curiosity and standards of evidence. Before we get right to an interview I'm very excited for this week, paying the bills, do a few announcements. First of all, what you're hearing right now, Das Tapes. Thank you so much. That is the name of that band. You can find their music in the Bandcamp link below. I love their music. Thanks to Lou, I discovered them, and they're really good workout music, I must say. So thank you, Das Tapes. This is a podcast as well as a YouTube show. So wherever you can get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, make sure to like, subscribe. If you're commuting and you can't look at video, because I don't recommend looking at video while driving, that's a great other option to hear my words, Lou's words, Michael's words, Jane's words, Rather's words. In order to support the channel, we are a public access channel. So everything is all for you. However, that being said, if you can support us, we would love your support. Super chats are open. They are a great way to support the channel. I know Lou talked about them just the other day. We also have Patreon. My Patreon is Patreon. There it is, Aaron. Thank you. Patreon.com/Daniel Miller. Just want to give me 5 seconds to bring this baby up. So, for all of you, and it makes the music go away. So, one moment, guys, just real quick. This is my Patreon. If you have, it's gone. I killed me. All right, well, as we're loading. Hold, please, for technical difficulties. I added a few more tiers. No pressure for anyone, but if you have the funds and enjoy what we do on here, your support is very, very much appreciated, because every dollar that goes in enables me to do more of this, because it is very time consuming, but I love it and I'd love to do more. But at the end of the day, guys got to pay his bills, right? So without further ado, a few other things. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Times don't always start at the same time. Sometimes we have UK guests, want to be UK friendly, or schedules don't work out. So by hitting the bell, you will make sure to get reminded. And our merch store. We have some awesome merch. Lou and the gang did a great job designing some cool stuff. So that's another great way to support our channel. But I have spoken enough. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of the deal. We have today Campbell Moreira, who is a UAP science data advocate, the creator of UAPstudy.com, and a moderator of the subreddit UFO Science, which I happen to be a member of, where he promotes greater public awareness of empirical evidence related to the study of UAP. Mr. Campbell, how are you, sir?
Good. Yeah, thank you for having me on, Daniel. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. It's so good to have you. I guess before we get into a great article that you recently published, I would love to hear a bit about, as I really ask everyone who gets in on the show, how you got into this. I feel like we all have our own little story of how this piqued our interest. And what's yours?
Yeah, like everybody typically involved in this subject, I, as a kid, was really into all that stuff. Always going physically to the library and renting, borrowing the books or whatever. All the funny ones, and eventually I just grew out of it. And then it was honestly the 2017 New York Times article that brought it back onto the radar for me as a subject to consider. At that point, I didn't dive into it, but I was thinking, like, these videos are weird and there's something going on here. And I consume a lot of news. I'm interested in news and politics and stuff. And just over the last few years, all these public government people keep higher and higher levels just kept coming out saying pretty extreme things. And it was really when I think it was maybe last year when Marco Rubio and the director of national intelligence. So we had the director of national intelligence and the Senate intelligence chair, who conceptually would have the most information available to the legislative branch, saying they had no idea what was going on. And that really started making me think. And then when Obama went on, former President Obama went on to the Late Late Show, and he said, there are objects that we can't explain that are in our air. They can't explain how they move, their trajectories. And that it was just so explicit. It made me wonder, like, I don't know if Obama's just not familiar with the subject, because he's kind of given some hints there that these are the key words that anybody looking at UFOs will pick up on, like the trajectory thing. It's like, are you sure you should be saying that exactly? So that really focused me in, and I just dove right in, and that's how I started to really get involved recently.
I would say that's impressive, by the way. I think that verbatim is what he said, word for word, because I've heard that clip a lot. So well done. Yeah, it sounds like we're honestly pretty similar. You start seeing the people who are saying these things, and it kind of makes you stop and pause and say, hey, what the heck is actually going on here? Right on. Well, how did you create your wonderful website, UAP Study? How did that even happen?
Well, honestly, it was this spring after I got really involved in the research, like intensely after I clued into there being something happening with Obama's comment being kind of the final, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
And then I just started diving in and looking at all of the different things that people pass around. And I was getting very frustrated not being able to find anything tangible that I would feel comfortable sharing with friends.
Absolutely.
To say, because it's like there are a bunch of neat documents out there, but then you take something like the Wilson memo, and it's like, well, who wrote this? And it's like, well, we can't even say for sure. And it's
right.
Like, well,
you need
that's
like a TED talk just to explain that whole situation.
Yeah, and it's a neat document, but it's not something you can hand to somebody and be like, this is like you clear, right?
Right.
And it's tough to read. Because but anyway, so stuff like that. So I kept diving in, and then I ended up, as most people who are familiar with my name would know, with Hezbollah. I came across the Hezbollah phenomena on a list of like UFO cases somewhere, and then I started looking into that, and then I found peer-reviewed, published articles, papers by Massimo Teodorani, Dr. Teodorani, astrophysicist. Gave a speech to the EU Parliament in 2011 about UFOs, and I really was fascinated that there was actually peer-reviewed data out there about UFO field studies, and I got into checking out that there are these particular geographical places on Earth with a much higher than average recurrence rate. The words that they use for Hezbollah is reliably recur. So that got me really interested in the actual information there. And so that led me to then start building the website. Then I got involved with Reddit, started posting. And then people's feedback back and forth, just conversing with everybody, people who agree, disagree over and over, just for, months, constantly. Somebody brought up this UAP in the UK Air Defense Region report that I have written on now. And that when I got a hold of that document, it was like, okay, this is a totally independent, you can want to call it data set from the publicly available Hezbollah research papers that span decades, many field studies. And they're saying they're describing exactly the same objects in totally independent places. And the coolest part was that the unidentified air phenomena in the UK Air Defence Region report, it was a 4-year study, top secret, Ministry of Defence. They used 30 years of a intelligence department, DI-55. They denied it even existed for years. So it was published in 2000, declassified in 2006. So we didn't have access to it until 2006. But Dr. Teodoran's field studies were 2000 to 2003, and his major paper was published in 2004. And so he described the same objects after the publication, but before the declassification, and they're entirely similar descriptions. And that just blew my mind, and that's when I really dove in.
Right. I mean, it's pretty good evidence for something. I mean, it's, independent corroboration, really. You have two separate things going on at not quite the same time, but before everyone knew about it, who are very far away. I mean, Norway's not close, who are talking about very similar observables or things that they're observing. Wow, that is fascinating. So this peer review, I want to get into articles in a second, but you mentioned this peer review. Say the name of that doctor one more time. Yeah,
Dr. Massimo Teodorani. He is an astrophysicist. His doctorate was in stellar physics. And he worked at the Medicina Radio Telescope Observatory in Bologna, northern Italy. And his boss, Dr. Stelio Monteminoli, who's a doctor in electrical engineering, but he's now the senior engineer at the National Institute of Astrophysics in Italy. He was very interested in the Hesdallen phenomena after a 1994 scientific conference organized by assistant professor Erling Strand, who was on the Big Phone Home Day 2, talking about his research since the 80s. And that was a major atmospheric electricity conference held in Norway. And that conference determined that there's something novel, exotic occurring in the atmosphere. And they brought in experts from all over the world that were all there and presenting and listening to presentations. And they determined there is something here. It's exotic. We don't know what it is. And it's not ball lightning, is something they conclusively said. But it may be explained by, if it is natural, we can get into that because that's really cool. If it is natural, it may be explained by an electrochemical model similar to but different from ball lightning. But at the same time, Teodorani, in his paper, Long-Term Survey of the Hesdallen Light Phenomenon, he describes that there's no known mechanism that would allow what appear to be luminous, long-lasting, all the features you can sort of attribute to UFOs. There's no known mechanism that allows for them to exist without sort of expanding and disappearing in our atmosphere. And these things are observed to last for like over an hour and a half and stuff. So there's something remarkable occurring.
Aaron, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. First, I'll say hi to everybody. But secondly,
Aaron,
I just want to point out
producer extraordinaire, everybody.
Hi there. I believe Mataluni did an interview with Teodorani earlier. So if you go back to the Singularity Lab shows, there's one not too long ago.
Yes, we were on the panel together, Aaron. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the first time I met you.
I must have missed that episode. I really got to go back. It's fascinating. This is the first time really hearing about it. And that sounds... because, I think this topic right now is so, in the discussion, is so American-centric, but the topic isn't. And there's been a lot of really good, if anything, I feel like almost more good quality research, and academia really have invested some time into it outside of here. I mean, it sounds like Italy especially seems like they're really with ICER and all that jazz. Aren't they based in Italy, or am I making that up?
I'm not sure about ICER, but there are notable UFO groups that are highly active and I believe centrally located in Italy. There's a long, Dr. Teodorani even now has been in a long-term way involved in studies nearby his home in northern Italy. They photograph and observe kinds of things similar to Hesdallen at a lower frequency rate.
Sure.
The coolest part though, if it was just luminous phenomena, that's interesting. It's kind of cool. But Dr. Teodorani states explicitly that 5% of the objects observed are structured objects that coexist with the purely luminous. And he describes remarkable things. And he says, for example, that he's seen the classic black craft triangles on numerous occasions in
Huh.
Hesdalen. When Michael on the previous show asked him about it, it was like, oh, like, is this natural? And Dr. Teodorani was like, it doesn't make any sense to me that it could be natural. I think it must have, he said, like, it was, there's video actually from a documentary from 2003 where he's saying, I was looking at it and that thing was a machine. And his Dr. Monte Benoli ended up, they both have had this is actually an interesting part that goes in with the Gillibrand Amendment, because they've both described physiological experiences associated with close contact with the objects. Things like the sensation of rocking in a boat, things involved with exposure to fluctuating electromagnetic energy. And that's actually the same thing that Dr. Eric Davis describes in a report that Matthew Wright actually shared with me, that he wrote about physiological effects of these objects. And it aligns with the self-reports of these physical scientists on site doing scientific field studies using SETI equipment. Like they built all these receivers and stuff. So he's seen these objects. And one of the most notable ones that he said, he saw a sort of an egg-shaped object that was solid, physically solid, and he knows this because it zipped past him and then stopped above a tree line only about 100 meters away with I don't know what that is, 300 and something feet. And so he approached it and he was describing this experience of having the physiological effects that like seemingly impair you in some way psychologically. And he's describing how very similar to how some people experienced with hallucinogenics describe how he says you have to steel yourself to it. And Dr. Monte Benoli, after 10 minutes of observing this remarkable object that was solid and low luminosity and the shape of an egg about 20 centimeters or so, Dr. Monte Benoli ran away to the car and drove away in terror. And he's interviewed afterwards. It's like, what were you afraid of? And he's like, I don't know. I had this feeling. And so it's like, it's really interesting how these things are sort of coming together with the Gillibrand Amendment. And also all of these things are in the Condon report, which, the UAP and the UKADR report. The Condon report is the top secret code name they used in the preparation of the document. But you're supposed to correctly pronounce it Condine. And it's sort of hard to say. And it sounds a lot like Condon report, which is the infamous one from the 60s.
It sounds just like the one we had from Colorado. Is that what it was?
Yes, that's right. University of Colorado, U.S. Air Force. So I mean, it makes me wonder, like, did they do that on purpose? They make hard to pronounce word, very similar to the other report that everyone hates. But so I just used the actual formal title, UAP in the UK, and then Air Defense Region, but UAP in the UK.
Yeah, that's why I think that less confusion. Wow, I never knew about. I mean, I was aware with Hesdalen about. I think Ryan even mentioned it somewhere. He didn't. Ryan Sprague is in the chat. Hey, Ryan, what's up? He has a great podcast, Somewhere in the Skies, guys. If you have not, if you have not checked it out, you absolutely should. I always thought there were lights that the different shapes, and I've seen the pictures and the videos, and some last a long time. But actual physical, like triangles, that's new for me. The egg thing, that's fascinating. His reaction, I'm not going to lie, it does remind me of, I think of what was mentioned in that Skinwalker Ranch book that just came out recently. I don't know if you've read it yet, but
no.
How these people, I had a whole conversation with Stephen Greenstreet about it on the show earlier, and I definitely had some issues with, in the sense that it brought up a lot of things that I'm like, what do we do with that? These are all these pretty out there testimonies that it's kind of hard to independently do anything with. But they mentioned how these people that were visiting, that were working on there through Bass, had the same issue where all of a sudden they were hit with this incredible feeling of terror and fear, and it made them also run away. So that's interesting how that's come up a few times. Sorry, I digress, but that's kind of just
no, that's neat.
A pattern that I think of. And you think about that. What is it? Slide 9. I don't mean to be getting too inside baseball, but how I believe there was a PowerPoint that was either leaked or just released that kind of had some of the details that seem to be common amongst these UAP from, I believe, some ATIP PowerPoint. And slide 9 talked about kind of psychotronic weapon, or how like they were. It seemed that these things were able to alter our perception or alter our feelings. So that all is kind of, and this is something that was pulled off of Christopher Mellon's site. So it's not, verified to the degree that I think would be perfect to take it all the way to the bank, but that's pretty good source. So that's interesting. Wow. Huh. Sorry, I digress. But that's...
It's remarkable how many things end up sort of coming together at a central point where we're clearly seeing that something is being described consistently.
Yeah.
And it depends on who you ask what it is. Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis have a paper. The name of it's escaping me now, but it describes specifically the mimicry elements that they propose are involved with these phenomena. And the things that they describe in that paper coincide very effectively with the contents of UAP in the UK. And with Teodoran's observations, and you have all of these people sort of coming together, like Jacques Vallée, a very interesting quote from him from I believe it was the late 70s. So perhaps his opinion has changed, but at the time he said, based on scientific field studies, all we know about the phenomena is that it represents an incredibly concentrated source of electromagnetic energy emission. And then you have Dr. Teodoranti saying something extremely similar, 25 years later.
Right.
Professor Erling Strand with his observations say something similar. So electromagnetism seems to be similar. And then it's who you ask, right? Because it's possible for these things. Okay, there's like the 95%, as Teodoranti describes from his 3 field studies, 95% luminous, appearing to be some kind of plasma observable. Now that could represent something, like I said, similar to but different from ball lightning, but it could also, as I'm well aware, represent some kind of process resulting from the field used by some kind of mechanical craft to travel through our atmosphere. In my article just now, I have a section about the MOD, the Ministry of Defense in the UK. In this report, the report lays out the recommendations for keeping the subjects secret because they aren't sure if the Russians are ahead of them on plasma technology derived from this study of UAP. And so it all comes into plasma. And then they propose a bunch of things like radar decoys and reducing sonic booms. And then there are papers now that I found and I linked to in the article from DARPA, the same year 2000 that the report was finished, starts a project to use plasma to reduce or eliminate sonic booms on aircraft. 2011, NASA publishes a conversation between scientists talking about how they are looking at using plasma to reduce sonic booms because plasma has an effect where it cancels the atmosphere, right, as it moves forward. And they say the issue with it on the plane is the energy requirement involved. Right. So, but it all seems to come together, and that's the fascinating part of all these disparate things.
Absolutely. And Aaron, sorry, I just want to bring that up one more time. I think that was it. That was a slide 9 I was mentioning before. I don't know where it went. Aaron, are you there? All right, maybe we'll come back to it. Well, let's get to your article then. I guess.
Sorry, my computer was freezing up on me. I'll bring it
that's
right
all good.
back.
No worries. We'll vamp. We can, if you need a minute too, we can talk other stuff.
No, I got it right here. Here we go. Share screen with this window. We want this file. Go.
There we go. Yeah, so this is I believe the slide that, and by all means, I'm sure someone in the chat could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this was pulled from either, it's gone again. Either Mellon's site or I think the New York Times maybe even mentioned it. Yeah, we'll come back to it. No worries. Aaron's having some technical difficulties. All right. So I believe this was in context of how it could be a threat or how it could be utilized as a threat against America if another country were to, be able to weaponize the things that seem to be observed. Science exists for the enemy of the United States to manipulate both physical and cognitive environments in order to penetrate U.S. facilities, influence decision makers, and compromise national security. For all you podcasters out there, this is what this thing says. Psychotronic weapons, cognitive human interface, penetration of solid surfaces, instantaneous sensor disassembly, alteration/manipulation of biological organisms, anomalies in the space-time construct, unique cognitive human interface experiences. Then for the DoD advantages, this is DoD has been involved in similar experiments in the past. I don't know what that means. DoD has relationships with renowned subject matter experts, and DoD controls several facilities where activities have been detected. So I, for that slide, kind of always shrug, because I'm like, well, I could mean a lot of things, and it's people can go to town and kind of inferring whatever they like out of that. But I will say that when we talk about these people, these individuals who seem to all of a sudden undergo a all of a sudden sense of terror, it made me think of this. And also it is interesting if all of this is true, then if that means they can control our perceptions, and that kind of brings up a whole other question of if whatever these are can control the way we experiencing anything, then it makes you wonder. I guess you start to wonder, well, then what's quote unquote real? Like, are things we seeing actually there, or is it just something we seem to be perceiving? Because if you have something that's able to literally change the way you perceive something, then who knows?
Yeah, anything's on the table.
Anything's on the table. Yeah. So I don't know. That slide always, I'm sure maybe it'll come back. But I honestly, to be honest with you, didn't pay it much mind because it was a little so quote unquote out there. Until I saw in the bill language the physiological effects. And that really made me pause, because while there could be something there, for me, it's just, other than, of course, you think of John Burroughs and Rendlesham, or some specific, like Cash Landrum, or some specific cases. To me, it felt like, well, we're just trying to just convince modern academia and the government that there's a there, and let's hold our horses and start small. So the fact that they even included that language in the bill at all was really threw me for a loop. Sorry,
go on.
No, please go. So I was saying that's why I kind of thought about the slide again. I think it's worth looking over again. But what were you going to say?
It was remarkable to me as well that the Gillibrand amendment was so specific. Honestly, I would have assumed that the things that she, or at least whoever wrote the bill and she's sponsoring, she's saying things that are very deep cut, right? Like,
it's like a ufologist wrote this thing. It's crazy.
Yeah, they were the physiological, especially, immediately brought to mind the Eric Davis report that Matthew Riot shared with me, and it's just been such a long history of this type of thing being described from so many different angles, and it looks like everything's kind of finally coming to a head. And that's why I wrote this this article. It was largely inspired by the big phone home, the message that we need evidence that we can put on a senator's desk. And, that inspired me to take a look around, and it's like, what do we got?
Yeah.
And what I found, what I think the best, this is my opinion, the single best piece of evidence available that any individual interested in this subject can use to convince somebody who does not yet believe in it that it is a serious topic to be, looked at and dive into. It's the UAP in the UK Air Defence Region report, because there is absolutely nothing else like it. It's an official, declassified, top secret, Five Eyes intelligence agency report saying their language is incredible. And we should get into it, because it says that they exist is indisputable. It launches into an exact description of what we would call the tic-tac, capable of accelerating to exceptional velocities and vanishing, outmaneuvering any known aircraft or missile, manned or unmanned. They're describing all these features that we would only attribute to, and they say they're exceptional UAP. And I get the discussions with people all the time on Reddit where they're like, I posted it today. It was actually number 2 on the 500,000 person group, Are UFOs.
Nice.
So people are looking at it, they're interested, and then a few people, almost entirely positive, but a few people would say, like, because my title is like MOD says UFOs real or whatever, and then some people are like, well, yeah, of course UFOs are real.
Right.
Anything can be a UFO, like a bird can be UFO.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, that's true, but let's look at the introductory paragraph.
Right. Read the article.
or just the introductory
just
paragraph.
The first few sentences, yeah.
And it's like they say the exact opposite. So I don't know, but that's why it's remarkable to me. It's like the UK MOD, they fought to keep it classified. When it was published, it was the same year in 2000 that new Freedom of Information laws were passed. So they didn't necessarily even know it was going to be, FOIA'd in this way. And
that's very interesting.
They weren't, it was like before, like the internet was a big thing. Like the guy who wrote it would not have been like a young guy. They would not necessarily have recognized the seriousness of putting all this on paper. And it's
it's going to be seen by everybody in the future. Yeah.
And people say like, oh, they're saying they're real, but like, the thing's a wash because they, the language that they use to describe what the objects are. People don't like it, and I don't like it either. And actually, Guthrie Dice brought this to my attention in a conversation with him.
He's great.
I think he's maybe one of the smartest people on UFO Twitter. Honestly, I always am asking his opinions on things because, like, he's always got something interesting and important to say.
Very intelligent, interesting guy.
And he pointed out to me that some of the psychological effects section. So the report is controversial, the UAP and the UK ADR report, because it says UAP certainly exist. They indisputably exist. These are the languages that they use. And then they pivot when they're saying, okay, that's the nature of their existence. That's correct. Now, what is their origin? And then the language changes to uncertainty. And that is the shocking part to me. And I didn't pick that up initially. And Guthrie pointed out to me that the language shifts here and there into this uncertain territory. And when I started looking into that, and it's saying, it seems as though there is a possibility that some maybe is how they describe what they think the objects are. And then they say they may be a novel, exotic form of atmospheric plasma caused by meteors entering the atmosphere and neither disintegrating nor impacting, but instead converting into a charged buoyant mass. And so that is what they say. They say some, possibly, maybe. But they say it's indisputable. So the really foundation of my article is that they say they exist for sure, certain. They are not sure what they are, but they were happy enough to leave it at that. But so they're saying, oh yeah, we recognize these exotic things are in our atmosphere. And then they say, oh, they pose a known risk to civil air traffic safety. They state it explicitly in there. And then they provide advice to pilots on what to do if you encounter a UAP. And they say these civil authorities managing air traffic should be notified of these important results. And they never were. So what we have, and then the next thing is, keep these things secret because we're going to militarize the plasma technology from exploring this stuff. And I just want to say the meteor thing, that is 100% inconsistent with the data derived from Hezbollah. It is not associated with meteor reentry. They recur in a specific geographical location.
Right. So all meteors just happen to land in one spot.
Well, okay. And the report's language, they say some of these things are barely understood and based on incomplete science. So what we see is the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense decided that it was more important to militarize what they have seen and to keep it secret than to inform about the credible civilian air traffic safety risk that the objects represent. And they are not even certain that the objects are what they're saying they may be, which is like, I don't know. I grew up kind of with like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be idealistic, but like kind of a faith that the government kind of knew what they were doing.
Right.
And this 4-year study, top secret, based on 30 years of classified materials held by DI-55, says that they are not certain what they are. They do pose a threat to air safety, and they
We're not
know
gonna
for
talk about
sure
it.
that they exist, but don't talk about it because we're going to it's more important to militarize
Right.
the plasma. So yeah, it's just extraordinary, and I don't know what to make of it, but I think people should be talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like after this 4-year study, they basically came up with, I mean, I don't know, I guess it could be that. And then you think the next logical step would be, all right, let's get some scientists then to look into it and see if we can prove that or not.
Yeah.
Because really they ended it with just kind of a pretty weird hypothesis, which is, usually where you start.
Yeah.
So there clearly was no effort to, I mean, unless it's still, I guess, classified, who knows, but that to really engage with it on a further level than after that report was done. They just decided, okay, we're going to just keep this under wraps and hopefully we can utilize it in war. It sounds like, wow.
Yep. And they're very afraid of the Russians being ahead of them on plasma technology. It's kind of interesting because even the American documents from the 50s say almost the Project Twinkle declassified documents say something almost identical. We're afraid that the Russians are ahead of us on this type of stuff, and we need to keep this secret because we don't know where they're at and we don't want them to know where we're at.
Right. And doesn't I mean, I could be wrong here, but I remember reading somewhere that doesn't that report also mention how they themselves received reports that Russia had engaged with these things and had been shot down? Is that true? Am I making that up?
I'm not familiar with that being in UAP in the UK. Oh, well, okay. There's a section that says there are reports that foreign nations have attempted to engage the objects that have resulted in fatalities. So it does say that actually.
Got it. Okay, that might
Yes.
be, and then I'm probably construing it with another thing that I think George Knapp may have gotten from Russia, but that also is kind of just from one journalist, and we try to not take things just from one person, and we believe in corroboration here on Known Quantities.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's just I'm really reminded too of how Harry Reid. Now I'm just, man, there really are, and I know this already, but there are such echoes of history from this report, Condine, and then what was specifically in Condin, not the conclusions, but the reports themselves, and then what we're hearing today, right? I mean, the ODNI report alone said, yeah, it's an aviation hazard and potentially a national security one. And you have, however many years ago, over 20 years ago, a report in the UK saying the exact same thing. You have Reid saying Russia's working on this and we should be worried. And you have UK saying the same thing. Gosh, I feel like history really does repeat itself. Well, I do feel that because of what I really like about your article is that while I was familiar with Project Condine, and I think I had glossed over it in the past, and I was more familiar with that conclusion about the meteor thing, and I think I misread it and I misunderstood it as, oh, that was the conclusion they held, and they explained it away, a la Project Blue Book kind of style. But no, the specific language in this report, it's right there in black and white, is quite clear about how this is a reality. And I'm really thinking within the context now of what's happened in the last few years, if this Gillibrand amendment passes or proposal passes, knock on wood, it will, that might be great ammunition for all our UAP UK media folks and anyone who's trying to get their government in the UK to really take notice, to maybe pay attention. Because I understand, I bet you the UK is not going to is going to wait to see what the US does, probably, since we're in the middle of doing it. But I am very surprised by how clear it is that this essentially, in language wise, is a more declarative statement about this phenomenon than the report we just had in America was. And now that I've been looking at this topic now officially like a year and 2 months or so, I'm just kind of startled that I learned about it through your article. right? Because it seems like such a big deal. And you have some people who are like, yeah, this has been here forever. But I don't think it really has been looked at in this context. And we have to keep in mind that a lot of people are new to this topic, and there's a lot of information out there, and it's overwhelming. And I think picking apart the really key points in this thing, it's a really big deal.
I think that it's extremely important also to point out and remember that this is a classified internal report designed to inform executive level decision making. Only 11 copies were produced, physical copies, back before the whole digital thing was going on, and they were very classified. They did not even inform the public-facing Ministry of Defense officials or elected oversight of the Ministry of Defense that the report existed, and they denied that it existed for years until it was declassified via Freedom of Information by oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but I actually quote him in the article.
You do. It's in there.
David Clark, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. And he is actually a folklore professor, which is kind of interesting. And that actually goes in really well with Valet's work, right? Where he talks about how over time and culture we project onto these things, or maybe the objects are projecting onto us. Yeah, it's a mix, right? Because of these weird effects that apparently are occurring. But the physiological effects, the psychological effects in the UAP and the UK Air Defense Region report, something that really, I agree with this, it bothers people, is that they say, once again with conditional, uncertain language, but they propose that observations of solid craft, like, things that look like machines, they say that they think that they are just pure hallucinations. And caused by electromagnetism. Now, and that obviously, correctly is offensive to many people who have seen them.
Sure.
Now, if you dive into the information, because when I read that, like originally, I was like, interesting. They must have good information to say that. But then talking to Guthrie, he's a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
He's pointed out to me and sent me the information. This claim is based on Dr. Michael Persinger, a scientist who created what was called the God helmet. You put on a helmet and it, interacts with your brain through electricity. And then allegedly he had numerous peer-reviewed articles published on it in the late 90s. And this is what influenced their writing. It published in 2000, but those have not been replicated. And that's what Guthrie pointed out to me. So he's like, they are basing this extremely important thing on something that has actually not to this day been replicated. So they're making mistakes.
Very ironic. Yeah.
And it's just like they're toying with, I say in the thing, it's like from a national security perspective, I can't imagine this. And it terrifies me, honestly. And this is why I got so interested in the subject, because it's like, if there are things actually in our skies we can't identify, that is a unprecedented paradigm shift. The entire history of what I was taught on the subject is exactly the reverse.
Yeah.
I'm a very no religion ever, very sort of clean cut for the most part, and didn't focus on any of this stuff. But in their own words, this report scares me because it shows that they actually are screwing around with our safety in ways beyond my imagining, honestly.
Right. And to make it worse, because of the stigma, when they see these things, they usually don't even mention it to everyone else. I mean, it's just
pilots getting fired for it. It's just like, what the heck?
Right. It's pretty. I mean, if you just replace that word with, it was like a Russian drone or a Chinese drone, but we don't talk about it because they look weird. People are like, what are you talking about? Why aren't you talking about it? What's wrong with you? Say something, right? So it's not that, and I don't want that to think that I should think the pilot should say something. What I'm annoyed with aren't the pilots who aren't saying anything. I'm annoyed with the stigma and the fact that sociologically speaking, there's a fear there at all, right? So that's a major problem. Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. It's scary, and I'm just flabbergasted with maybe it's just like a marriage to this idea of Occam's razor or what, but how when you bring up this issues, the response is, it can't be that. Or like you're trying so hard to think of an alternative hypothesis because the idea that it could be not even non-human. I mean, who knows? Like it could be like an atmospheric phenomenon. That doesn't always answer the question, some of the questions I have regarding the phenomenon. But the fact is we don't know. And that should be enough. We should be curious to find out. We're trying to figure out we're trying to figure out many things in the universe. What is dark matter, dark energy? What are these fast radio bursts we're getting? And people aren't laughing at them for trying to figure that out. They're giving them grants. So
yeah, and that's Avi Loeb is always talking about, right? He's like, trust or follow the evidence, and
right.
You have to lead with the evidence and let your sort of opinions be guided by what you find, the verifiability and things like that. And that's sort of my academic history. Like, I graduate University of Ottawa, ethics degree, philosophy, and my business administration. But then I got into one of the top law schools in Canada, Queen's, in Kingston. I did drop out because I didn't want to be a lawyer. I realized very quickly. But I understand academic research.
Right.
I'm very familiar with it, and that's why I was going into this, and I set myself with this task to try to find stuff that would convince people reasonably. And, you exactly what you're saying. There's this interesting barrier. Like Mick West, I got him to actually engage with me about the head Teodoran's paper.
Yeah.
And Mick West looked at it and he said, oh, the number, well, and, fair enough. But he's like, oh, the journal he got published in, it's not credible enough. It's the Journal of Scientific Exploration, which is, it's not a premier journal, but you can't, it's there. It's, I think the professor from Stanford, I think, founded it because he discovered that people would not publish things that are sort of on the cutting edge.
Right.
And then, but
what about the actual, ideas in the paper? I guess has been my question versus just the location it was published. Yeah.
Well, and then he said, he said, well, I think the scientists probably saw something, but not what they say they saw. And that's what his opinion was. So it's like, okay, I don't know what to do with that. And then so I got Jason Colavito, another a skeptic or debunker, to engage.
Yeah, I spoke with him a bit on Twitter today.
Okay, yeah, and I was disappointed because I don't agree with. I think he's a bit too mean. I don't agree with him on a bunch of things, but I do respect his intelligence. And it was really disappointing to me to see that I talked to him about this report, and then he says, well, the report says that they're non-technological. So, like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, it's describing novel, exotic objects in our atmosphere, Jason, and you're like demonstrating an understanding of the contents, and you're dismissing it. But to recognize that they're non-technological, but they occur, is the opposite of what he's been saying to people, saying that the phenomena themselves don't necessarily exist. And I just don't know what to make of it because these are intelligent people, but Yeah,
I thought about it a lot, and I think it's approaching the concept from how to disprove a theory, maybe, rather than to holistically look at what's presented and how to further investigate and gather information. Because really the truth is it's a pretty big low information zone, at least publicly. And I think most people who, are do have an education in terms of like what academically, like what scientifically is needed to further investigate this, or what the standards of evidence are, and that's a whole separate conversation we could have. There's not enough there yet. But there's a there to look for it. And I feel like I get frustrated because so much of their pushback is about just not even looking into it. And that always, because I'm just like, aren't you curious? Like, let's just go down your path. Like, okay, great. It's not any of these things. We still don't know what it is. So what is it? I want to know. I'm curious, and just like, I want to know what dark matter is. Why can't we account for that in the math? Like, I want to know how many exoplanets there are. I want to know what the James Webb Space Telescope is going to find. I'm curious. And so it just seems to me such a intensely non-curious point of view. I can understand maybe from Mick West's background, especially the misinformation and disinformation background. He that is his MO, is to, he does a great job debunking conspiracy theories. I will say that. So, and in all respect to him. So maybe I can understand that point of view, but it does definitely, as someone who just is so curious, it does definitely make me go like, I don't understand it. And it never, it's like hitting a wall. But Lou had a great question here. 1 minute pitch, Campbell. You have 1 minute to put this in front of a senator. What do you say? I'm assuming this is the UK
UAP in the UK. Yeah, well, okay. 1 minute, that's tough. I'd have to prepare myself, but I can make an attempt.
Elevator pitch.
Yeah, the executive summary is what I would use because the report is actually like 4 volumes, hundreds of pages. The executive summary is like 20 pages and it summarizes everything in an excellent way. So you hand that to the senator, and then it's this is a genuine from the UK National Archives, declassified, top secret Ministry of Defense DI-55 intelligence report, commissioned over 4 years to refer to the past 30 years of classified material held in DI-55 files pertaining to the study of UFOs in the UK. This report was declassified in 2006, after with resistance from the Ministry of Defense after they denied that it existed. It says that they believe that UAP with exceptional characteristics consistent with the described features of the Nimitz Tic Tac indisputably exist. That is their words in the report. And they wrote this internally to secretly inform executive level decision making in the UK. They then go through and identify that plasma related technology is the key finding of the report, and it needs to be secretly weaponized because of the potential breakthroughs in all kinds of things, including fusion power. All of these remarkable things, the radar spoofing that the U.S. Navy has, these all these kinds of technologies. So it's they're laying it all out. It's 100% like they're just saying it as it is. It's not like this preliminary ODNI report that's public facing. This was internal facing, and there is nothing like it, nothing else like it. It's a remarkable document, and it is, I think, the best foundation that anybody interested in the subject, I think I already said this, but anybody can use to convince somebody that it's a real thing, even if you want to get into the language details and stuff. Some may be these meteors, even though the field study research, seems to contradict that because they do not observe meteors forming the objects. Anyway, but the real foundation is what I just said, that it's a genuine report, top secret, and they inform themselves that these things indisputably exist, certainly exist. And that is something that requires focused attention, because once we have identified that novel exotic phenomena exist in the atmosphere and we don't know what they are, there's a clear national security obligation to conclusively identify those objects.
Yeah, that was great, man. Well said. Yeah, I think it's a great argument, and that's, I am optimistic. And bottled water, I'm sorry, it's that level. It also might be my tripod. My tripod might not be level, but I hear you. I can only imagine. Is it this one? It made it worse. All right, well, moving on. I'm sorry. So, yes. Are you optimistic that you think, given the momentum we have, that academia will maybe start to engage on a deeper level, not just in America, but perhaps in the UK or globally?
I think that because of the trajectory we're on, there is hope there. If things just were status quo, like I'm very familiar with Dr. Titorani's entire sort of arc of his career, and he has been punished for being involved in this. And it's really depressing to me in some ways to see what's happened to these scientists, these physical scientists. Like he is a doctor in stellar physics, and he gets trashed. Like Italian Wikipedia, like a group of skeptics who are editors on there just deleted his Wikipedia page.
Wow.
And it's like, he's done hundreds of interviews, he has dozens of papers peer reviewed, like he talks on all kinds of, anyway, like it's like it doesn't make any sense. But now I think that there is a clear trajectory where, now that the, even the preliminary ODNI report identifies there's something going on. And then if there is increased awareness of this stuff, like the UAP and the UK ADR report, like it just is so crystal clear. This is the thing I love about that report, is that in my eyes, and I'm sure people would disagree to some extent who don't agree with me, but In my eyes, that report, since it is from the UK National Archives, it's 100% verified. Wired, The Guardian, BBC News have all reported on it. They all say the exact same stuff about everything that I'm talking about. I cite everything I say in the article because it's so important to me. You know, it's this thing clearly is happening. There's something going on there, and like you can't get away from that. And I just don't like it flips the narrative to be that the person saying that the objects do not exist become the conspiracy theorist because it requires that they intentionally included false information in a report that they denied for years that they would let it out. They fought it in court to prevent the declassification. Like it flips the narrative. So the people saying that the objects, it's nothing, it's conventional, they're the conspiracy theorists. If you take this report at its face value, which I believe you should, and a bunch of prominent news organizations say you should. And that's what I love most about it, really.
Right. As more people come out, more senators, and the list just keeps getting longer. Martin Heinrich, senator, just recently made a statement about it after Gillibrand, and it's now just a long, 2 years ago it would have been news and people freaking out like, whoa, the senator said this, and it barely made a wave because it's like, oh yeah, add it to the list. Like 19 people that are now saying this is a real thing to take seriously, and it does become a point where you're like, at what point do you have to start building up these narratives in your head to make what's happening make sense if it isn't real, right? And that exactly the people who are convinced this is still not, there's no there have to get a little creative now. There's a few people there's quite a few people who think this is all just some grand lobbying effort, either for increased Pentagon budget or maybe certain contractors perhaps. And I think, sure, maybe, but I don't think so. Like, I can't say no for sure, but if you're looking at a list of probabilities now, you're starting to sound like it's like the deep state, is all working together to or, they don't know, they're seeing something weird and they know what it is and they want to find out. Like at what point is now which option is now more reasonable? I feel like now it is more reasonable just to say, yeah, there's something weird going on and we're trying to figure out what it is. Surf Psych, if you claim you have no neighbors, you need to show you have looked out the window. Yes, that was a great quote from, I believe it was either, I saw these all together. It was either on this show or it was with Max Moskowitz, who had a show with Avi Loeb, Lou Elizondo, and Christopher Mellon.
Avi Loeb says for these people who sort of resist the new information, he describes them as being psychologically conservative, not socially, but psychologically. They're holding on to the worldview that they had held forever and grown up with. It was a huge shift for me psychologically to accept that there were objects in the atmosphere that are not explained. That's a huge and part of me was afraid of them, and another part of me, I was so excited because how many physical exploration frontier type stuff exists in the modern world? A novel physical object type thing is occurring and we don't know what it is. That's a mystery for the ages. I can't really...
Absolutely.
And that is so cool to me. And they aren't abstract, like black holes and theorized or whatever. These are physically in our atmosphere.
Right. People are talking about them and have been talking about them. That's kind of what made me, and we'll wrap up here in a moment. When I first got interested in this topic, and I basically got interested the exact same way you did, I remember getting kind of pissed off. I was like, what do you mean this has been a thing for decades in terms of paperwork and declassified documents? And I'm not talking about testimony. And there is enough of a paper trail, enough declassified reports, enough independent testimony to warrant that there is a there. And the ODNI basically confirmed as much, right? As did the report we were just talking about. But why I think it's so important to get academia involved is, look what got you also interested in was Eric Davis's peer-reviewed paper, Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis's peer-reviewed paper. I think that holds weight. Not only do we give credit to these people who, make a living in academia, teaching and researching. There's the publisher parish, there's a whole industry in there, but also the peer review process means that they put out an idea and it gets beaten to crap. It gets destroyed. It gets picked apart. There's a lot of review going on. Of course, there's politics in it, and there's favors, and like everything else in business and in politics. I'm sure that exists there, but that is what people will. I think more engagement from people like Davis, and I know Eric Davis is a controversial figure, but we don't have to get into that. But I think there is enough there, like what Avi Loeb is doing, and hopefully so many other people maybe will get involved too now. I think that is what's going to put this ball down the road, I think, because I'm trying to just think how to say this succinctly. I think if you're thinking about an 80-20 principle in terms of what 20% will do 80% of the work, I really do think academia engaging with this and and wrestling with it for God knows how long. It might take decades, but figuring it out and working with it and writing papers on it. And those papers get published, and then Scientific American and New York Times, Washington Post, they write about those papers. I think that's how you make the world realize, oh, this is a thing. We probably don't know what it is, and now we got to figure it out, but it's a thing now. And I think if we can just get there, and I think that's why I wanted the government involved so badly, is because the government getting involved reduces the stigma, which will then allow academia to get there. I think if we can get there, we can't go back, because then you're going to capture the imagination of so many people who are undergoing what we're going through, which is just, holy crap, what do you mean this is actually a thing?
Yeah.
What?
Well, imagine being the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee and asking about UFOs and being effectively told there's nothing to it, and then finding out later that a very deep project actually existed to weaponize technology from UFOs, and they decided that it was not, sufficient. Like, you didn't need to know, as the chair of the, legislative branch's intelligence committee. And that is literally what we know based on the UK and the UAP ADR report actually has occurred in the United Kingdom. And so why couldn't it have happened in the United States? I suspect that it probably is happening. And so the senators themselves, I think, will be shocked and demand answers once they realize what is happening.
I agree. I think people ask why now. I think that's why. I think the Senate and House the committees are kind of pissed off. They're like, what do you mean? You told us there was nothing to this, and now we're finding out through this that there is. Like, okay, well, we control your budget, so you got to tell us what's going on if you want to get paid.
If you want to lose another $400 billion or whatever it was. Come on.
Exactly. Awesome, man. Well, this is a great conversation. It just flew by, so we'll definitely have to have you come on again, man. I really appreciate your insight. You're a really smart guy.
Thank you.
And your article is fantastic. I encourage everybody to please read it. We'll make sure I'll tweet it out, as well as maybe Aaron can get a link out on chat. And then send me those papers you mentioned earlier too with Eric Davis. Are these the DIRDs?
Okay.
Or
I'm not sure what's.
Okay, no worries. Well, whatever Matthew Wright can send it to me.
I got the links.
I'm curious. Okay, great. I'm curious. I want to check these out.
The link to the article is at the top of the chat. It's pinned at the top.
Fantastic. Perfect. Thank you, Aaron. All right, guys. Well, Campbell, before I let you go, where can people find you?
Twitter, UAP Study is the main place, and then go to Reddit and come to UFO Science and do some reading, and we can have some chats.
Awesome, excellent. Well, great chatting with you, Campbell. We'll definitely have to do it again soon.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Really enjoyed it.
No, it was a pleasure, man. It was a pleasure. All right. Well, that was fun, guys. Let's see if I can get this music to work. Hey, there we go. So, before we head out, just a few orders of business. Did I kick myself off? Oh, boy. Hold on. At least all the technical issues happened once. This looks weird, but we'll make it work. Yeah. Hold on. If you're on podcast land, I apologize because you don't know what's going on. Great, we're good. So, sorry, Aaron, you're probably trying to fix it, and here I am clicking all these terrible buttons. That was Campbell Moreira, everybody. Such a great conversation. I probably easily could have gone another hour, but he will definitely be back. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of Known Quantities. Thank you again to Das Tapes, Bandcamp link in the link below. As I mentioned many times, this is a podcast, so please like, subscribe, download. I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Daniel Miller. If you like what I'm doing and have the means to support, your support is very much appreciated. Thank you, as well as everyone else on the UCR network, including Michael Mataluni. Like and subscribe if you have not, kids. Merch store, and of course, thank you to BlueMarlinChronicles.com. That'll be it, guys. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.
No.